Broadcasting from the Symphony studio in Marietta, Georgia, it's time for the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. Tune in every week as we spotlight the very best minds in our industry. Now, here are your hosts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. I am one of your hosts, Katie Galley, and I am, of course, as always, joined by my co-host, Trey Gaskins. How are you doing, Trey?
Katie, I'm doing great. Good to see you today.
Yeah, you too. Been doing a lot of these episodes lately. It's been super fun, jumping in, learning more about the property tech space and the incredible people that are part of it.
That's right. Well, we are very, very lucky today.
Yeah, we are. Because in this podcast, we get to speak with and learn from the top thought leaders in the property tech space. And in our Symphony studio with us today, we have the National Director of Design Phase Services for Smart Building Solutions with JE Dunn Construction, Chris Andrews. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing awesome. And that is quite the title that you have there. Yes,
doesn't fit on a business card. It just says over, and you have to tip it over and see it.
Say it real fast.
I love it. Well, Chris, I'm super glad that you're here with us today. Can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your professional journey, and how you ultimately ended up with the position that you have today with JE Dunn?
Sure. I came a very non-traditional route. I went off to college on a jazz band scholarship. And
really?
So, I had aspirations of being a professional bass player.
Wow.
And did get to spend some time up in Nashville and appeared on 2 albums. And while I was trying to play bass and make money, which is very difficult to do, I became a union electrician. So I went through the 5-year IBW program. And in being a service technician for 10 years, landed in a data center for what was then Bell South, which now AT&T has swallowed them up. And that's what really got me transitioned from electrical to communications. And I trying to think of how in the world I landed here specifically. I've been in this for almost 26 years, and so it's a lot of friendly connections. A lot of people, say, hey, this is a great opportunity over here at JE Dunn. They're doing something a little bit different. I know I'd kind of gotten frustrated with our industry looking the same year after year after year, and kind of felt like we were hitting the same brick walls. From a technology standpoint, I always tried to connect myself to an electrical contractor, so I was closer to the beginning of an opportunity. And I realized after having come to JE Dunn that I was still a year late coming to the opportunity. Wow. So at JE Dunn, we work on these projects for over a year before we ever break ground, and we don't talk about the technology till almost a year after that. So, we're pretty early on. So I have a very exciting job now.
Yeah, it seems that way. And Chris, way back when, though, when you were a jazz musician and playing bass, and what made you decide that?
Who did you play with? What are your 2 albums? Can you share that?
Sure. So I was a member of the band Hyperdrive, which was a Christian rock band. We released the album in October of 1999. I think if you looked us up on Amazon now, it would still show up, but it's sold out because we're not pressing those records anymore. And simultaneous to my recording that album, I was also in Nashville recording for a solo artist, Neil Cooper, which was, someone else I traveled with.
And so then what made you decide to make that shift? And you said to start to make some money, to make that shift into the industry that you're in today?
Well, it was partially a shift out of an industry was really what happened. Ironically enough, I was a little tired of traveling. When you're a young musician, you agree to doing 250 concerts a year. So you're either at a concert or you're in between. Mm-hmm. And this was a time period where cell phones weren't prevalent. And so you were cut off from everyone every time you left. And so, and contracts prevented you from playing too many concerts in your hometown because they wanted that to be the biggest concert possible. So you may only have played locally once a year. So it was, for all the fun that it was also difficult to be gone all the time. Yeah. So I said that was ironic because I get on a plane every other week and go somewhere. I work for 22 offices of JE Dunn, and so there's a lot of travel, but travel isn't like it was back then. You're on a cell phone, you're talking to somebody at the airport, you're texting, you're FaceTiming, you're sometimes better connected while you travel than if you're home, because your communications are intentional when you travel. So travel's not the problem, that it was in 1999.
Right.
And you're right now with so many different methods of communication. I mean, it's it's seamless, and you're always kind of on demand. And so then, Chris, from there, making that transition out of an industry and into the one that you're with today with JE Dunn. And two, like you said, obviously, traveling is a big component of what you do with your job. But as the National Director of Design Phase Services for Smart Building Solutions, what exactly do you do?
Well, that's a mouthful of a title, and it goes with a mouthful of a project. We're chasing no less than 4 projects on any given day. We do little 12-day sprints within my group. Okay. So as a whole, Smart Building Solutions is the low voltage arm of JE Dunn. It doesn't mean we manage the low voltage scope of every single JE Dunn project. We have kind of a sweet spot that we target. So projects that have maybe 5 systems or more need a little bit more attention from a project management perspective, and sometimes from an integration perspective. And so that's why our group exists. And so my responsibility specifically is fulfilling the design if it was incomplete. My team we serve as the design team if there is no designer named. So that's, you want fries with that kind of mentality. And sometimes we're just the subject matter experts that all sit in one little think tank over here in Atlanta. So if you have a specific thing about the scope someone doesn't understand, or we just need to figure out this one little integration, we're the focused group of people who have to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. So at any given time, you're wearing any number of hats, essentially.
Sure. You always have to wear a hat when you're bald.
You want to get sunburnt there.
That's right.
That was a good one.
Well, Chris, I guess from a low voltage standpoint, tell us about some of the things that you've seen in the last couple of years. How are things changing as a large general contractor? Are you seeing some shifts in how low voltage design and technologies is being looked at a little bit differently, or how the market's treating it differently?
Well, so over maybe the last 10, 15 years, I'm seeing we had a lot of systems that were completely independent. You remember PBX systems that we put in a building, and they were a completely independent piece of equipment.
That's my first job, by the way.
Yeah, so it was one of mine too. When I transferred from the electrical world and landed in that Bell South data center, one of my responsibilities was to, the old Nortel switch that was there, and so we did all the moves, adds, and changes for them. But anyway, that was a completely independent system. There was no integration between phones and data. Now you don't really see a dial tone anywhere. So everything has kind of followed that. The cameras that were once run on coax are now run totally on twisted pair. The amount of integration that we do with that with the image that we capture on the camera, now there's all this metadata who sits on top of the image, and we can say, if this box changed by 25%, then we're gonna call up an alarm. We've had some kind of emotion, and now we're figuring out what else we can do with that metadata and with analytics, and saying if it's swiped from this direction to that direction, someone entered the building, but if it's swiped from this direction to that direction, then someone exited the building, and we start getting people counts. And so there's I just rambled for a minute on telling you how all these systems have now integrated onto one consolidated network, and then with that step from there, how we are starting to use the capabilities of having everything sitting on one platform. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is figuring out what to do with all the data that's available to us.
Right. How would you say JE Dunn compares to, I mean, we work with a lot of different GCs, but you guys, I think, are doing things a little bit differently from a low voltage standpoint. For example, on a lot of projects, we'll get low voltage designs from a design architect, or it could be something that we design. But I've seen a couple of your designs, and they're quite impressive. And maybe it's normal to you, but I think a lot of other firms maybe aren't used to seeing the detail that you guys put on your designs. But can you talk about why that level of detail and getting really in the weeds is important for you guys?
Well, I don't know if we intentionally did that from the start. I think we came at it from a different perspective than the average design firm, and that's how we landed where we're at, and it became a differentiator for us. So let me expand on that. So we're all everybody in my group, and I mean nationwide, not just the design phase services piece, but totally in smart building solutions. We were all technicians at one point in time, and we all had a lot of complaints with the drawings that we've been given over the course of our career. And so when we set out and started doing our own drawings, we did them with the level of detail that we wanted to provide as a shop drawing.
Right.
And we felt like we were better covered on our scope if we were that specific, you know? So even if we're not the designer of record, we still create these drawings and say, this is exactly how I want you to put this together. And, you know, our trade partners don't have to give us shop drawings at the end. They don't have to give us as-built at the end because it's a kind of a living document to us. But anyway, we did that because we wanted to be as clear as possible, because we knew we had X amount of dollars to spend, and we didn't want to go 6 months into a project and realize we had this big miss.
Right.
And so anyway, we use it as a differentiator now, is that level of detail in our drawing.
Well, I really, if there was an art museum for good drawings, you guys would be right up there on some of the best drawings. So the level of detail, and I was talking to one of your guys, and they were saying that every time there's new products or new devices, that they recreate them by hand.
Yeah.
And it literally is. It's a work of art, and somebody in the industry, I can really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I'll have to call out, give a little shout out to Ezra and Asia, who do all that drawing, because I sure don't do it. But they are fantastic at their jobs.
Yeah, no, they're great. How about from shifting in technologies? What are some of the hot technologies from a building standpoint that you're seeing these days that maybe weren't so prevalent a few years back?
Well, I'm seeing GPON a lot more. So my history, pre-JE Dunn, is I worked for a lot of union electrical contractors who didn't spend much time in high-rise residential, and we didn't spend a lot of time in hospitality. And in my transition to JE Dunn, I'm in those markets a lot more than I've ever been. And so GPON, which maybe isn't necessarily a new solution, it's certainly a new one for me. And I'm noticing a lot of what we call flags, the major brands of hotels. A lot of them are starting to warm up to GPON. GPON's an old technology. It's how we get internet into our house, but we always recycle something and find 7 other uses for it. So we're kind of exploring how we can use that same solution, beyond the hospitality market. A lot of people would like to see fiber closer to that edge. They want a cable that they can put in and not have to replace in 5 years. And fiber really kind of sounds like that kind of solution. We get everything stuck in the walls, we get everything stuck in the backbone, and we're only messing with an active piece of equipment at the far end. And so that's the one we're looking at most right now.
Okay. How about from a wireless standpoint, and everything being so mobile centric these days, how's that shifting some of the designs you guys are doing today?
I don't know. Everything right now is an experiment in that wireless world for us. We're trying to understand this whole IoT sensor thing. Mm-hmm. We're studying what is a well building. I don't know if you've even gotten into that. We were in LEED certified buildings a long time ago, and now we got well buildings that we're, 2 years ago, 5 people asked us for a well building, and we didn't know what it was. And last year,
What's
I think
your
15.
definition of a well building?
It's like lead platinum times 100. It gets into your diet, gets into how you're monitoring the water quality. I mean, it's I don't want to say it's crazy stuff because someone's going to pay us to do it. But it is, there is a real focus on making the environment best possible place to work,
Sure.
which ultimately does help everyone's health. But I don't know. We're trying to figure out. There's a line from Jurassic Park that I like the most, and I use it all the time. And it's just because you can doesn't mean you should,
Right.
And so we're looking through every possible IoT device, and we can watch all of this stuff, but is it useful to you? So I don't know. I ramble quite a bit if you haven't already noticed, but I'd tell you everything wireless that we're looking at is how can we get that IoT device as accurate as possible, because basically it drops out of Wi-Fi all the time. Nothing's ever fully connected on Wi-Fi. So which is to say we're looking a lot at the CBRS, that private LTE space.
Sure.
So we have one of those sitting in our office as well as part of this crazy experiment.
Interesting. What kind of things are you thinking about for CBRS? Because I know there's a lot of connectivity. It's a private LTE network for people that may not be aware. But what kind of uses are you looking at it for CBRS? Because frankly, we've gotten ourselves certified on it, and we're playing with it ourselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of things. To your whole point, there's a lot of things you can do, right? Yeah. But should you do them, and what's the best use case for it? Does anything jump out at you as a great CBRS use case?
Well, one of the top ones for us is our job sites, because our job sites aren't, we build these big behemoth buildings, right? And we don't want to stick Wi-Fi access points all over the place. And so the CBRS network will take us deeper into the building with fewer number of access points. So that's a big piece. Mm-hmm. Number two, when you're down in any kind of city, there's all kinds of RF floating around all over the place. If you can get yourself into a more private, in a frequency range that's not heavily used, that means all of our iPads that we're carrying all over the sites, they work a lot faster. We do. Right. We have our own suite of software. We call it Lens Aim, and it's basically an active model that you can view from our job site, and we do kind of almost real time collision detection. Where we can kind of you can point your iPad at an area of the wall, and it'll show you what the wall's supposed to look like in the future. And all of that
augmented reality or virtual reality built into it.
So we do, yeah. So not every job is on it. Our whole life is an experiment, right? But yes, we literally have that built in house. But all that takes a lot of bandwidth, and we just can't have all of the interference. So that, anyway, that's probably the biggest test that we're doing right now in CBRS.
And if you don't mind, what brand are you playing with, out of curiosity?
It's a Ruckus access point, but I can't tell you who's provided it for us.
No, that's fine. That happens to be the same brand that we're playing with as well. So yeah, just curious. How about DAS systems these days? Are you seeing a lot of DAS systems in your buildings?
No, I don't even want to say it's a 50-50 kind of thing. It's a conversation on every single job. It's the first thing that gets VE'd out is what we call the commercial DAS or cellular DAS. What has really picked up is the public safety DAS. We call everything's DAS to us. We should probably more properly call it the RRC, but,
it's another long-winded, I think we figured out 17 syllables to do. Yeah, radio response communication system.
Yeah, that's certainly a mouthful. Some cities just call it the IRCs. You do that? Can you put in an IRCs for us? I'm like, whatever. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. Right. I mean, we're basically pricing it on every job, and we're almost twisting the arm of the owner, going, the chances of you getting by without it are slim to none. We're pretty much telling them it's just mandatory. Right. every now and then we have a customer that says, no, I'm going to wait until the inspector comes in and this whole building's done. And when he tells me I got to put it in, then I'll put it in. I went, do you know how much it costs then? But yeah, it's in our day one budget, and they have to twist our arm and make us take it out.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of ERGS activity as well. In fact, we've just had a session with the local Atlanta fire marshal, and it's interesting to see how quickly things are changing, and then the new standards are making some of the survivability elements, keep getting more stringent. And if you don't build that in early, like you just said, it can cause all kinds of problems later on.
Right.
How about from a connected building standpoint? Tell us about what you're seeing there as far as like building automation or access control and video intercoms. Any trends you see there that jump out at you?
I'm not really seeing anything new. Nothing great and fancy about that stuff. We do a lot of access control. We do a lot of video surveillance. The only thing we're seeing is the amount of things people want to do with the metadata that I mentioned earlier with the camera. People are watching people's tendencies. If you can collect the data and say that this demographic of person, this tall person, this male, this whatever, if he comes into your mixed use area and he turns left every single day because he's headed towards that Starbucks, it's data that people collecting, and when they're trying to sell a suite inside their building, they go, I've got this many of this type of person who has a tendency to coffee in the morning versus French fries in the afternoon or whatever. This kind of person uses a fitness center. They can kind of explain away a person's tendencies. Then it helps them rent out one of these suites. And it helps, if they're selling a retail space, it helps that person say, we need more of this type of product or a variety of product or something like that. So it's
right.
Video is becoming more and more important, way, way beyond just, from a evidence perspective.
Right. What about from a COVID perspective with, we've been asked about taking our cameras and thermal imaging on cameras or access control to try to make things more touchless. What are you seeing? We
took a long dive at every camera that was out there on the market that we could possibly buy. And, one of those theme parks down in Florida bought just about every available one that was FDA approved to get your actual internal temperature. And I don't even think they're using them. The problem that when we made it through our whole path of looking at all these cameras and how we were going to verify if somebody was sick or not coming inside a building, we ultimately, the end of this whole story was, we worried about the liability we were tied to. Because if you give somebody a false sense of security and they still get sick, and all of a sudden you're worried about getting sued. And so the conversation went away from technology after that and went more into questionnaires that we sent out to all of our employees. This is what we did for our own internal, and asked what would make you safe. And nobody cared about the cameras. Nobody cared about getting lasered in the head, on the way in the work each morning. They worried about people's own self-reporting, They wanted to know what our cleaning methods were. So anyway, the end of that story to us didn't necessarily include technology.
Okay. Something I'm trying to learn a little bit more about, but have you looked into some of I saw a building downtown is putting in some UV lighting that's supposed to kill the virus, and not exactly sure how that works. Have you looked into anything like that yet?
I don't really. I know our MEP people who sit to the aisle to my left, they started putting some air ionization stuff in our ductwork, trying to, basically spark the air and burn up the the bad juju. But no, I've not messed with the UV lighting.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I guess it can be, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Chair, but it seems like there is, I mean, of course, there could be leaps and bounds in technological innovation, but it's more so about actually talking to people and seeing what they would want in a new building, or, I mean, even specifically, like you said, within JE Dunn, listening to what people would be looking for as far as safety goes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the only technology tied to that was the old Survey Monkey.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, at least you got that done efficiently.
Right.
So. Yeah. Yeah.
How about in the future for JE Dunn? Were anything new coming down the horizon that you're comfortable talking about that's not too company specific for you guys? I
mean, to us, it's just growth. I mean, our group is just it's a small group and a very large ship, you know. We're 26 members out of almost 4,000 people in JE Dunn. So we're just, it's rapid growth. It's not really, yeah, I don't know that there's anything new and fancy that we're doing. It's just keeping up with the demand of the big beast, so to speak.
Well, just from my perspective, we deal with a lot of different GCs. You're probably one of the more advanced internally groups that deals with low voltage solutions. So a lot of people are aware of it. You guys are more than aware of it with the team that you have, and again, the drawings you put together and the designs, and so it's kind of cool to see. And not necessarily that there's a right or wrong, but it seems like it's kind of turned into a little bit of a competitive advantage for you guys.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We're pretty excited about it. It's we didn't know how to describe it for a long time. You know, we're 6-7 years in, and for the first several years we called it self-perform, and everyone's mind went straight to, so you're pulling our cable in, right? And we're like, no. And we don't even believe that to be our future. We feel like our specialty is in that service of making sure all of these systems work according to plan. You know, we don't hire independent contractors to put independent systems in, and we get nothing that connects those systems together. So we feel like that's our specialty. That's where we belong. And so it's been a long journey just learning how to describe what we do.
Right. How about last question? When you look for a low voltage partner for your installs, what are you looking for? What kind of skills and background kind of fit your model?
So we look a lot at number of certifications. And what I mean by that is if we need a specific camera brand certification, we look at how many people are certified to do that same task. Because a lot of our trade partners have one of everything, right? And so the one time you're installing that system on our job site, that one person's not available, may not even be in the right state, you know? And so we carry some of those certifications ourselves internally, so to help combat that problem on our job sites. But we're looking, it's all about people, right? So we're looking at the specific people you have that are certified to do any one of these tasks. And then our risk management team is looking at, you know, just what your credit looks like, what OSHA logs look like. So we have to be protected on both of those fronts. And then we do JE Dunn, I think company-wide, we're at a 25 million average job size. And so that's a pretty good size contractor that we need. We sit in a regional office here in Atlanta, and our projects are closer to 100 million each. And so that's a pretty, you know, even at $100 million building, that's a pretty good size technology package. And so,
right.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have hundreds of people on staff really for us to feel really comfortable.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today and diving into this great conversation. If someone wanted to learn more about you and JE Dunn, where might they do that?
So our website's a great place to start, jedunn.com, jedunn.com. You can take a long search, and I'll send you the URL so you can put this in the comments down below to how you can find the Smart Building Solutions page that's within JE Dunn.
Yeah.
And I don't mind someone sending me an email direct at chris.andrews@jedunn.com. I'll answer every question that anyone asks, but I will tell you that sometimes it takes me a couple days to answer your questions. I spend a lot of time on an airplane, so I'm just not always staring at the phone,
Gotcha. And last question, do you still play jazz music?
I don't. So I don't do jazz music as much as I do. So I play for my church. The staff bass player for Greystone Church out in Loganville. We're a multi-campus church, and we have a pretty large online presence now, more than ever.
Right.
So I am there most Sundays. I take 2-3 Sundays off a year. So that's the majority of my bass playing now.
Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest and their company, check out the show notes for the relevant links. If you would like to learn more about us here at Symphony, of course, subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Symphony Technology Solutions and on Instagram at Symphony Tech Solutions. Here at Symphony, our ultimate goal is to make harmonious music out of all the technological noise. And we hope today's episode helped in doing just that. See you next time.